podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
United will beat Fulham scrappily, then lose at Arsenal. So it'll be, we've turned the corner, and then disaster, Moyes out.
We've turned the corner straight into a brick wall. No, I mean, Arsenal seem to be the only team in the league that are scared of us. So maybe we'll put the heebie-jeebies into them and they'll all get poorly again before this game. Anyway, I guess before we get all the way to that, Ed, how you doing?
Pretty good, yep. Not too bad given how terrible United were at the weekend at Stoke. I did like that tweet you put out asking could anyone remember a worse performance by United other than the first half against Stoke, and several people returned the tweet by saying the second half against Stoke. Although I know you're of the opinion United were a little bit better in the second half, but it's all relative, I suppose, between just about as bad as you possibly get and a little bit better than that.
Yeah, I put that tweet out for a reason. Like, it wasn't a rhetorical question, it was a serious question. I was trying to remember a time when we were worse than that game. And people did, to be fair, come up with some pretty impressive answers. The second half against West Brom when we lost 2-1. Someone going a bit more old school with the 0-1 against Ottolul Galati in the Champions League. Oof, that was some bad scenes. Conceding 3 in about 3 minutes against City to finish 6-1, so it's at level 2 rogue. Conceding 3 to Basel at home in the Champions League. The thing that I thought about that Stoke game was, like, in the first half we were playing into the wind, not into the wind, with the wind at our backs, and every time the ball went off the ground, it went completely out of control. And yet, time and time and time again, they hoofed the thing.
Well, 47 times to be precise.
Right.
That's the number of times United hoofed it. Not the largest number of hoofs by a side in the Premier League. I believe Everton, Aston Villa and Southampton hoofed it more often than United, but even for United, that was a lot of hoofing.
I mean, it was just one of the most abject, pathetic, frustrating. I was so, just disheartened by that half of football. You know, the signing of Juan Mata, you're hoping for something a bit different. You've got the promise of there's a really brilliant attacking side somewhere in that, and there's problems with it, like they need new midfielders. But apart from that, you could put together such a good side out of the players available to Moyes, and instead he's got Juan Mata on the wing, on one wing, Ashley Young on the other wing, get to the byline cut. I mean, 32 crosses, 5 of which found a United player. David Moyes, Edward, does not know what we have to do to win. Oh no, really, David? Because it appears that you really know exactly what we have to do to win, and you're just keeping it from everyone for fun. I think we all know you don't know what it takes to win, mate.
No, I know, yes. Nice piece of honesty from Moyes there, inadvertently. I looked up some of the stats because just to have a check-in on whether United are doing anything different than my eyes are telling me. United have the lowest percentage in the league of possession spent through the middle, or conversely, spend more time on the wings than any other side in the Premier League. You won't be too surprised by that. Lie about 12th for long balls. So I thought we might be nearer the top of that table. Having said that, all the teams that are above us in the actual table are above us in the long ball table, as in they play less long balls than United. 6th and 7th in the league for pass accuracy and possession. So, this is, I suppose, a reflection of United's pattern of play and quality of play this season. It's not good. Stoke was particularly bad and particularly brain dead as well. So you're playing in a howling gale. You want to keep the ball short and on the ground, don't you? Not if you're David Moyes' side. You still keep pumping it forward and attempting to hit those wings. And we made a bit of fun about the signing of Juan Mata and what it might mean. Well, it's still same old tactics. Nothing's changed. He was pretty much for the entire first half consigned to the touchline. Yeah, he was an old-fashioned right winger, and the ball was launched at him repeatedly.
This is easily the half of football I've enjoyed least under Moyes. Many listeners will know I am by nature an optimist, although I found the appointment of Moyes to be a pretty backward step. But I liked to think all the way along that actually I'm really missing something here. But that half of football encapsulated everything. As that level 2 rogue was at pains to point out, we've played badly under Ferguson many times, but there are two things that are different. One, that was generally in the context of us playing well most of the time, and two, those are the exceptions where we didn't do enough, whereas under Moyes, it's been the rule that we haven't done enough. And you could just say about that Stoke game, alright, so he had a plan, and that was unsettled straight away with Johnny Evans pulling up and Raphael coming on and Phil Jones going into centre of defence. Well, that's actually not a bad thing tactically, certainly not a bad thing for our style of play to have Raphael at right back instead of Jones. The injury which forced Carrick into defence, I totally agree, but that didn't happen till right at the end of the first half. I'd been driven crazy by the terrible football long before that happened, sort of thing. And actually we were better in the second half under those circumstances. Oh, I don't know. It was just atrocious, and as you say, it was so brain dead. It was so clear that the way to beat Stoke, and amazingly, the goal came when Matt had drifted inside and slipped a through ball into Van Persie. The goal did not come from hoofing across into the box from the byline, as Moyes, how could we not score? We got to the byline. We all know you get half a point for getting to the byline. Anyway, yeah.
Yes, tactics out of the Mr. Chumley-Warner school book, isn't it? It's
That's 19th century football right there.
I mean, we joke, but it is archaic, right? This is not far out of the Charles Hughes book of percentage football, right? The belief that it takes 3 passes in which to score a goal. The one that's hoofed out to the wing, the one that's hoofed into the box, and the one that scores a goal.
Yeah.
And this is the real worry. So that's what Moyes believes. He sets his team up. As we said last week, you can buy as many world-class players as you want, but if you're going to get your team to play like that, they better bloody know how to play like that, I suppose. And given it's pretty rudimentary and quite easy to defend, then United are in a bit of trouble. I was highly amused. I found a link on the internet. Someone had commented on another blog, Stretty News, I think, if I'm right, to give the right credit there, and put the link to an Everton blog called School of Science, and it was an Everton blog from a couple of years ago in which they were moaning about David Moyes and said the style of football is terrible, it's one-dimensional, it's really negative and conservative, he seems to hate flair players, he doesn't know who he's buying in the transfer market, and please could someone take Marouane Fellaini off us, will bite their hands off for as much as we paid for him, which was 15 million. Of course, they bit our hands off for a 12 million pound profit instead. It did make me laugh because you could basically replace some of the Everton names in there with United players and it'd be entirely accurate for United now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, quite. I've seen a few similar sort of pieces and stuff like this is what you feared the Moyes era would be about, right? There are still people who are absolutely convinced that David Moyes is the right man for Manchester United. Fergie's picked the perfect successor and he's going to build a wonderful legacy if given enough time. And it's a view that I can't really dispute because I didn't really watch that much of Everton, but what I did watch was it looked like this, basically. It looked like what we're seeing from United. And
well, I can dispute it because I've seen plenty of Everton over 10 years, and this is how they played under Moyes. They didn't play good football. They did play in this kind of one-dimensional way, and it worked for them to come in the Premier League somewhere between 4th and 10th most seasons, right? More towards the 7th and 8th, which was coincidentally almost exactly what their wage budget was too. Moyes' Everton performed about on par, destroys the myth that somehow he created way more from Everton than he should have done. So this is a manager of a just slightly better than mid-table side who's taken his just slightly better than mid-table performances at Everton and transported them directly to Manchester United.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think there should be a serious conversation happening right now about whether Moyes should be allowed to continue as manager of Manchester United. I think people will say, well, that's ridiculous knee-jerk Chelsea fan behaviour, and I would say, no, that's every football club, and you could say that we're special and we give our managers time, and that's fine. And when I say a serious discussion about it, I don't mean the assumption is that he should be sacked, but the idea that it is completely ridiculous to even think about replacing David Moyes at this stage or in the close season, to me it's like, no, that is really not a ridiculous conversation to have. That is a conversation to have based on what he has shown to be his capacity. He's had 6 months at United and it's getting worse.
Well, yes. I have to say, I said I think he should have 3 transfer windows and some time after that, and I can't really dispute that. I mean, I'm not sure I could ever predict it would be as bad as this. I pretty much knew how United would play under Moyes, and I had plenty of arguments with people in which people would tell me that, no, he'll adapt his style. And remember, Gary Neville said that Moyes will have to adapt his style to United, not the other way round, and I disagreed with all of that, and I said no, he's a manager, he's not a philosophy manager, he doesn't have a particular pattern to his style, he's a reactive manager, but he does get his players to play in a certain way, generally speaking, and it's pretty predictable, and all of this was very predictable in terms of how United would play. The results are worse than anyone expected, of course, and so being a results business, cliche, trademark, of course you can have that debate about whether he's the right man. I think 3 transfer windows is probably enough, and it's a fair one to adapt his squad. Now, if he hasn't done that after 3 transfer windows, that's a failure of the executive, but also a failure of David Moyes, because apparently he rejected all transfers that United had lined up, potentially lined up. So in my book, and I don't own the club and I have no shares in the club, thank you, Malcolm Glazer, so I get no say in this, but in my book, it's one more transfer window. He better have a successful one, and he better get United playing in a nicer style and picking up more points by this time next year, otherwise he should be in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that's completely reasonable. I do find the backlash to anyone that says anything critical about Moyes' performances to be really frustrating, because it's like, this is what's happening in front of our eyes, and all the comparisons with Fergie, like, Alex Ferguson came to Manchester United an absolute winner. United was finished second in his first season in charge, and he joined a club in shambles. And for all the problems in our squad, and there are problems in our squad, Moyes has made them all worse. Apart from the signing of Mata, apart from getting the best out of Wayne Rooney, adding Januzaj, and the signing Juan Mata. Those are the not Wayne Mata. That would be bad. those are the positives, but in terms of getting the senior players to play for him, well, maybe they can be held account to the fact that they're not, but what's he done to earn such little loyalty? The Rio Ferdinand stuff today, absolutely crazy.
I was holding onto the walls while reading that, I tell you.
Ignoring his obsession with his own bowels, there was some mess talked about David Moyes. I mean, maybe not. Maybe he's just that stupid, but I don't think he thinks he's that stupid, old Rio.
So, yes, you talked about the positives there. I don't believe he's got the best out of Wayne Rooney. I think he's got more out of Wayne Rooney. Maybe that's the best that Rooney can give now, if we believe there is some semblance of decline having set in. A lot of people disagree with that viewpoint, by the way. Mata, yes, opportunistic as a signing, though. I'm not sure this was in the strategy. In fact, I think that belied the fact that United do not have a transfer strategy. He just became available and they went after it. Fair enough, when world class becomes available, as Gabriel Marcotti said in the Times, you take it, and that's what United have done. Didn't fit into a long-term squad development pattern by any means, but why not? And then Januzaj, yes, lots of praise there for giving him a chance, but Moyes does not have a history contrary to the myth of bringing through young players. That Everton blog I mentioned earlier moaned about the fact that Ross Barkley hadn't been given a chance. And look at him now, has been given a proper chance under Martinez, and is arguably, along with Januzaj, the best young player in the country.
Absolutely. The Stoke game then, an abysmal first half ending with an unfortunate deflection off Michael Carrick.
Oh, terrible luck. The gods of luck are so against United. I mean, I've never seen a deflected free kick in my life, ever before. It only happened to David Moyes.
The second half, a mild improvement.
I'm surprised the referee didn't kick it in, because, obviously they are all against United as well.
I mean, to say that he doesn't know what we have to do to win a game after that pile of turgid dross. Like, pass the ball on the floor, mate. That is a start. Get your little lads to pass to the other players in the same colour shirt as them, and you're well on your way. Give up the idea that goals can only come from crosses, or they count double if they come from crosses, or something. Is this just like a Hong Kong spread betting scam? Is that what we're going on? He's only interested in the money he can make off backing goals from crosses.
Well, I tell you what, we're spreading something and then we're grabbing our ankles because we're getting every week, and when Stoke outpass you, you know something's desperately wrong. Now, look, let's get some things on the record here. United had a lot of possession against Stoke. It was in the wrong areas, and then it went long, and it was really messy. So, the fact is that even with 60% possession, it just didn't look like United were knocking on the door to win that game. Not at all, not in the slightest, and it was just, the quality was dreadful. That could have been a championship game. That's how bad it was. And the frustrating thing is, and I wrote a whole piece on this, and in fact I didn't really even do much writing. All I did was lift the words that David Moyes said about himself and his team over the last 6 months. It's always defensive, it's always reactionary, it's always blaming someone else, and the ridiculous part about it is he's always saying United played well, save for a couple of games in the game against Sunderland away in particular, where he's come out and told the truth and said United did not play well. Most of the time he said we were unlucky, it's someone else's fault, or we played really well.
19 attempts on goal from United, 4 shots on target. That might be part of the reason why we didn't win as well.
Yes, and I thought the fact that United weren't scoring any goals was all down to Rooney and Van Persie not playing.
It was nice to see Mata feed Van Persie. I had a lot of hope in that moment, but United were deflated by Charlie Adams' excellent goal. And, there was some genuine misfortune. The fact that Vidic got himself stupidly sent off against Chelsea really cost us dear in this game. And it was on the cards, right, that Vidic sending off, which it was a harsh sending off, but it was astronomical stupidity from Vidic. And it really did come back to haunt us, because when you've got Michael Carrick in the centre of defence, you got problems. Although ironically Stoke's second goal didn't really come from that happening, but we had problems with the whole shape and structure of the side after that, I thought.
Yes, and none of that helps, but are we going to go back to let's moan about bad luck? Sorry, but even with the substitutions and the bad luck, we were flipping players out of position, and that was Smalling starting at right back, and then eventually Raphael came into right back, right? And, it's just infuriating, because I think there's so much that is obviously being done wrong, and it wouldn't take a lot to fix some of these really basic things. Some of it, I think, is a little harder to fix. For example, Moyes' gravitas, or total lack of it, is a bit harder to fix, and that comes out in the fact that he's so defensive and so small-minded in his communications with the media, and therefore the fans as well. He gives a very bad impression off, and noises around Moyes not being respected in the dressing room is significant too.
Alright, so I guess that's the Stoke game, right? It was grim, it was a wet and windy Saturday, and we could not do it against Stoke. And I don't know, the rest of the season, we were really lucky with other results, right? What happened is that essentially we ended up not capitalising on what would have been a pretty advantageous set of fixtures.
Well, because Liverpool drew West Brom, right? Everton won.
Yeah. They did, but they'd previously lost to Liverpool, so we could have made up some ground on.
So with Liverpool's goal difference, it makes it effectively 8 points we've got to make up on them, and we're not showing the kind of form that would do that. In fact, we're 12th in the form table right now. And
I do think it will get a bit better. I don't know, I'm almost reluctant to say that, because I'm not sure what I'm basing that on, except for blind optimism. But I feel like we have got some very good players in our team, and surely they must be able to do better football than they've been doing up to this point. And at some point we're going to have Januzaj, Rooney and Mata behind Van Persie, and I'll be really interested to see whether that means Januzaj and Mata humping in crosses or not. We'll see.
Yeah, it really is like having an F1 car and sticking it in reverse and screaming around the streets. But there you go. To bastardise a couple of quotes there. Talking of which, when Gianluca Vialli took over Chelsea, great Marcello Lippi, I think I'm right in saying, said it was like putting a learner driver in charge of an F1 car, which is kind of what's happened at Swansea this week with Gary Monk, 34-year-old Gary Monk, no management experience, now Premier League manager after Michael Laudrup was sacked. I have to say I feel a bit sorry for Michael Laudrup, because his essential beef with the boardroom is that they haven't backed him to get a bigger squad because he qualified for Europe, and his team has suffered as a result. And this has happened to other teams that have qualified for Europe, smaller teams with small squads, and they've all suffered, and he's basically paid for his success and the fact that he's demanded more resources from a resource poor club.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we've got the flip side of thinking, on one hand, that the sacking of Laudrup seems harsh, and on the other hand, thinking it perhaps wouldn't be the harshest if we got rid of David Moyes. But I do think that that's got to do with the fact that Laudrup sort of proved himself very successful at Swansea, really, in his first season. But the flip side of that is that Laudrup consistently gets sacked in his second season places. I think there are mitigating circumstances here with the Europa League situation, but it does happen an awful lot to Laudrup that he loses the ability to kind of build the team or have the same sort of impact on the team that he does in the first season in charge, it would seem.
Yeah. Well, I wonder whether he's got some Glenn Hoddle problems here, Glenn Hoddle syndrome, in that he was such a good player, he struggles to coach players who aren't of the same standard. There was a lovely quote from one of the players at Malaga, where he was manager previously, and who said that it was annoying that he was still the best player on the training ground, 20 years after he'd retired. And once voted the best player in Spain of the last 50 years. And he was a wonderful player, wasn't he, Laudrup? Unbelievable player.
Unbelievable.
And he's not quite converted it into being an unbelievable manager, but he has produced a very nice Swansea side, and building on some good work from Brendan Rodgers and Roberto Martinez before him. Anyway, he's out of a job. More than a few cheeky scamps on Twitter were saying, perhaps we could offer him the United job, I think probably that's not going to happen.
Well, when you say the United job, do you mean the one partnering Michael Carrick in midfield? Because I think we'd have that. I think that could work.
That's right, yeah. A few pictures going round of supposedly United's kit for next season that had Seven and Cantona on it. Doesn't sound like that's the real kit to me, but a few people saying, can you stick him in midfield as well?
All right, should we do loads of Twitter questions? Because there's not really been anything worthy of talking about going on off the pitch at United.
What Rio's toilet habit's not good enough for you?
I mean, it is interesting that he stepped that far out of line, really. I'm not talking about the toilet tweets, but tweeted after the Laudrup sacking, managerial merry-go-round in effect, who are we thinking is next, lads, or something like that. And I mean, it's not particularly subtle, is it?
No, but as we know, he's the mole in the dressing room. Allegedly, yeah. Definitely allegedly, honest Rio.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because at first, Moyes gave an interview this week saying that he's still in his plans, and he said he was a huge part of his early time in the club. And that is really interesting that he just played him over and over and over again and basically wrecked him, and that's it. He just squeezed the last bit of defending out of Rio Ferdinand, and that he's left him with no defending left in him.
Some speculation that Rio might be David Beckham's first signing, and Beckham, who's launched Miami Golden Balls FC, or whatever it might be called, but they won't actually become an MLS club for another 3 years, so I think that might be a little past Rio's time.
Yes, absolutely. He will just send them a consignment of 5 caps, presumably. So yeah, I mean, that Rio situation is interesting. He's obviously, and it's pretty unprofessional from Rio not to be fulfilling his function as a senior pro, but he obviously feels slighted in some way by something that's going on.
Yeah, well, and he knows he's on the way out, and he's not going to get much of a look in for the rest of the season. So he's long retired, been retired from international football, so he won't be going to the World Cup. So I suppose he hasn't got an awful lot to lose. If it carries on, I suppose United might sack him and, as you said, send him off to Celtic. And, that happened with a long-time Red of past.
Yes, quite, yeah. Yeah, it did strike me as a kind of like, Rio's going to find his locker combination's been changed when he gets to Carrington tomorrow. But, The other thing that happened in terms of players breaking ranks is there was an allegation that Anderson said that loads of players wanted to leave Man United, but actually that was a slightly mistranslated quote, and then he put on his Instagram, I love Man United, man. I'm like a Man United fan club. Don't think I would be horrible about Man United. I love them. That's pretty much exactly what his voice sounds like when he writes on yellow notepad in Instagram.
Yes, he also said some stuff about how much he's loving Italian food as well.
No surprise there, really. All right, Twitter questions. Talking of jokes about Anderson, which is what we normally get lots of. At Nye Beveridge, one of the great Twitter usernames, says, do the every single one of us will stand by David Moyes chants actually weaken Moyes' position? I've thought for a little while that it definitely changed tone to a bit more sort of desperation and defiance when it changed from the sort of slightly more upbeat come on David Moyes chant to every single one of us will stand by David Moyes.
And now it's become ironic.
Yeah. I'm going to be standing by him going, Dave, get him to pass it shorter. It'll work, trust me. At LT Hart Vixen says, is Paul not capable of being mean? I think I've slightly proved with this particular episode that occasionally I am. And he also wants to know, Ed, if you're as harsh on your kids as United fans are being on David Moyes.
I said, don't pass your baby rice long. Don't throw it all the way over there. Just throw it short, just down here.
Yeah. I like this question from at pizza_face, pizza with a one of my favourite people on Twitter. It says, which of United's current side is best suited to play into their 40s, Ryan Giggs aside?
None of them. They're all going to bow out in their early 30s multi-millionaires, aren't they?
No, I think Robin Van Persie's going to play into his 40s unless he gets some crippling knee knack of some kind. I think Van Persie's he's uber professional, isn't he? So
yeah, we'll see. I mean, he has had a lot of injuries. Rooney won't be playing into his 40s, unless it's down the park or with a prison side somewhere.
Patrice Evra will be playing into his 40s. Like
he could well do that. Yes.
Yeah. Not at any great level, but he'll be like Edgar Davids style, managing a lower league team and picking himself and putting himself on free kicks and bends.
Yep, there will be some people still telling us that Tom Cleverley is the next Paul Scholes when Tom Cleverley is as old as Paul Scholes is now.
At beautiful_shame says, are we being a bit quick with Moyes? He says, I hate to do it, but look at Brenton at LFC. Terrible first year, but stuck with him and progress. I think it's not directly comparable because, first of all, for all Rodgers' faults, mostly he sounds silly when he talks, which is not the worst flaw, but it is a bit of a problem. He definitely had a plan. You could see as soon as he got there was a plan. He was going to build a Rodgers team, and everyone knows what that means straight away. And secondly, Liverpool were terrible when he took over.
Well, yes, true, yeah. Rodgers, have you ever seen that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy episode where they go to a planet and all that's on the planet are consultants and hairdressers?
Yes.
That's Brendan Rodgers. So, he's ridiculous as a person and as a soundbite. But he's got them playing decent football and it's taken him a little time. But, yeah, I absolutely agree. He didn't take them miles backwards first and he certainly wasn't playing hoofball, which is why the Liverpool public were more patient with him than, say, Kenny Dalglish or Roy Hodgson in particular.
And a question brought to us via at Jack K. Holt from Tracy Holt, who's Jack's mum, who says, when will they get better?
What are we talking about when we say they? Hey, Tracy.
Right, leave it, Ed. Just leave it. I think the answer is eventually. I do think at some point. I don't think terminal decline is going to happen. I think either the only way terminal decline happens is if Moyes doesn't come good and whoever they get in next is a disaster. Then we could be talking 20 years of this.
Yeah, well, Roy might be looking for a job after the World Cup.
Yes. At Tom_McGee says, will there ever be a boy born who can swim faster than a shark? I think we've done this question before, Tom, and I think the answer is no. I'm pretty confident about that. And at Ben Glorious says, when I dig a shallow grave, how come there's never enough dirt to replace what I've removed? Any thoughts on that, Ed?
I'm not a real expert on shallow graves, to be fair.
That's what we like to hear.
Yeah, I like to dig a bit deeper. It's a bit safer, frankly.
At Mickey Sixchins says, who is the they that Moyes refers to? My money's on Eileen Drury and Elvis.
Yeah, I think it's the people in his head. Can you not knock it? Can you not knock it, son? Get it wide. No, that was a terrible accent. I really cannot do accents. I think that was a kind of mix of Welsh and Geordie.
I like the attempt, though. I'm glad to hear an attempt. I'm pretty sure it's just Fergie. I'm pretty sure if you go back at the quotes and look at every single one of them and replace they with Fergie, it'll totally make sense.
Yes, but if you said Indonesian pygmy as well, that also makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. Talking of which, at JDW Tread says, if Moyes' PR was better, would he be less savagely criticised? And he says his main worry for many is that he doesn't seem to recognise how bad it is.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think if he had the personality of, say, a Jurgen Klopp, he'd be getting away with it. Mind you, if he had the coaching skills of, say, a Jurgen Klopp, he might be getting away with it too.
At Gary J. Matthews says, could you see any of our current problems occurring under Ancelotti, Klopp, Mourinho, etc.?
Not quite in the same extent, but maybe that's just me being negative because I'm clouded by the results. I think it would have been difficult for many managers, of course, because every single player that is at United now is a Ferguson player, and many of them were saw Ferguson as gods, and so of course that was difficult. But that said, every single player at Everton is also a Moyes player. Doesn't seem like many of them saw Moyes as a god.
No, and all the players wanted Mourinho, right? That's the scuttlebutt that day at the Cheshire races, just after they're not called the Cheshire races, are they? But they were, all the players were talking to each other about how they wanted Mourinho, and watching that game on Monday night, did you watch it?
I certainly did. Mourinho did one on City, didn't he? What looked like a fairly negative team from Mourinho dropped Oscar, who's been fantastic, and looked like he was going to play on the break, but they completely outthought City and were good value for their win. Typical Mourinho, he gets the results, doesn't he? And I think it's very interesting afterwards, Matic went into some detail talking about their preparation. They spent 2 days on tactics, on how to beat City. You get the impression that Moyes won't spend more than 2 minutes on tactics.
At Follow My Trawler says, isn't the focus on Moyes' tactics missing the point? Fergie was rubbish at tactics. Is the psychology stupid?
Yes, but Fergie didn't get his team to hoof it long either.
No, and he wasn't really rubbish at tactics. Occasionally he would do something tactically quite interesting. He just backed his players in a different way. Daniel Harris shared a video of counter-attacking goals between 92 and 98. It's like one of the most painful 3 minutes of my life watching that. It used to be really dangerous to have an attacking set piece against Manchester United. It certainly isn't anymore, except for Manchester United.
No, well, chances created on the counter-attack against Stoke, 0. Chances created from other open play, 12, so hoofing it in. Chances created from set pieces, 7.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? At Subhan Kadri, sorry about the pronunciation, would you rather United finish 4th with Liverpool winning the league, or United finish 7th with Liverpool finishing 4th?
I don't know, but that sounds like a really kind of negative Scouse-style question, that does. I'd rather United finish 1st and Liverpool were like 20th. Talking of which, abject failure, on a scale of 1 to 10, how funny is what is happening at Leeds right now? Actually, you know what? It used to be funny. It's probably not funny anymore, because I think as football fans under dodgy ownership, you can recognise that disaster could strike to many clubs. So it was quite funny when they got relegated, but now being thrown around like a piece of cheap rubbish between rubbish owners. Owners clearly not fit, but still passing the fit and proper person test that the Football League claims to use. This is a shame, and we've seen it at Crystal Palace, now come out of it, at Swansea, now come out of it, Portsmouth just coming out of it under fan ownership. So, probably deserve better, although it's still quite amusing.
I mean, they're obviously a huge rival club and obviously have a pretty nasty section in their fan base, but so do most clubs, and Leeds might have it a bit worse than others, but still. Football teams should be enshrined in law that community benefit is part of the responsibility of running a football team, because there's loads and loads and loads of much better ways to make money. This thing of like, football's big business, and it's in one of the opening chapters of Soconomics, I think, where it's like, no, football's tiny business. The scale of revenue at the biggest football clubs is nothing compared to any medium-sized corporation kind of thing.
Yes, well, the particular organisation I work for, the combined revenues of the board members is 1.2 trillion annually. So yes, football's tiny business on the scale of things. So I agree. I mean, in Germany, not to get onto a rant about fan ownership, but it feels relevant sometimes. The 50+1 rule in Germany is also backed by a 25+1 rule. So 50+1 has to be fan ownership. No corporate backer can own more than 25+1, which basically means there's a double way block on clubs being sold and leveraged and asset stripped in the way that Manchester United has. And they're very successful, and Bayern Munich now replacing United as the third most revenue generating club on the planet.
At Tommy_CTS says, what's your favourite Beastie Boys song? I think mine is not a Beastie Boys song at all, but it's a Kleptones mashup of the Beastie Boys and Queen called Break. Check it out, it's on YouTube, really good.
Very good.
You got a favourite Beastie Boys song, Ed?
Not sure I do.
You might want to check out their oeuvre. Very, very fine work.
More of an Eric B fan myself.
What's your favourite Eric B track?
Not sure.
You're more into your country and western than your hip-hop, really, Ed, aren't you?
I wouldn't say country and western has ever really been my thing either. I'm not really into slapping my thighs.
At Jack Hawkins 23 says, problems are not solved overnight. Moyes cannot fix it overnight, neither will sacking him fix it overnight. Discussed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing about whether it's a good idea to sack him is just to do with how you see the future direction of the club and how you see what the first 6 months of his reign at Manchester United indicates for the future of his reign. That's the thing. It's not going to solve it. There's no way of this season's European qualification, I mean, proper Champions League qualification is a significant outside bet at this point. There's next to no way we're going to win the Champions League. I mean, it would have to be fully Gary Neville written in the stars for it to happen, because it ain't going to be a skill thing.
Mind you, interesting that Moyes and Phil Neville and Jimmy Lumsden and Steve Rand were all at the Olympiacos game on Wednesday. So they're doing their research. Maybe they came away from that going, oh, interesting. Can we not knock it?
I mean, fills you with confidence, doesn't it, that lineup? I don't know.
The brain trust.
Anyway, I've had enough of giving Moyes a kicking, because he's trying his best. He seems like a decent chap. He's incredibly hardworking. There's no question about that whatsoever. He is putting his absolute all into this, and it's incredibly difficult to think clearly when you're under the kind of pressure he's under, and I'm sure that's not helping. And actually, I thought the substitutions against Stoke, they look like clouded judgment to me, and it's very understandable, and I hope he's had a chance to take a bit of a deep breath this week, try and regain his composure. And
I don't think that's an excuse, because I think the job is about pressure, and those managers that can see through all of that, make the right decisions at the right time, are the ones that are successful. Reference here, Jose Mourinho.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think it's an excuse. I just think it's a shame. I don't think he's a bad guy, and I would kind of love it if it turned out.
Who cares? Hey, Fergie was a bad guy. Yeah, he's a guy who, back to the hilt, the asset-stripping carpetbaggers that owned Manchester United. So he was always, Fergie first, everyone else second. So I've got no problem saying that. And but he won United a hell of a load of trophies as well. I don't really care what kind of guy David Moyes is, as long as he's not a racist or a paedophile or some other deeply unpleasant things. He in terms of managing a football club, maybe he needs to get a bit of an edge, and apparently he does have a bit of an edge, so don't care. The question really is he good enough to be Manchester United manager? Nothing we've seen so far tells me that he is. Nothing we saw in the 10 years previously tells me that he is. Based on his CV, he shouldn't have got the job. He has got the job. As I said, 3 transfer windows, 18 months. If it's not better in a year's time, you've got to say that's a very good period of time in which to judge him.
Not long now, lads. Just grin and bear it, get through it, enjoy the ride, it'll all be fine. Right, talking of Manchester United managerial geniuses, René Meulenstein covering himself in glory in West London. Not doing the best job, I think it's fair to say. Should he be given time?
Well, he's not had much time so far, but it's not going well for him. Then again, it's not a very good squad down there, and I think you can blame an awful lot of that on Martin Jol, who had the oldest squad in the league, and he'd let some of that go. He didn't do a good job, Jol. Didn't manage his squad properly, wasn't getting much out of them. Got the boot, and Meulenstein is suffering for it now. They've brought in quite a lot of players, including a couple of youngsters from United, so but they can't wait. They're in deep trouble, Fulham, and they're not the kind of club that can generate enough revenue that immediate promotion is obvious from the Football League either. So they're in a bad situation, and in that kind of situation, of course, the owner will know that they can panic. So the chances of Meulenstein getting sacked are there. Yeah, he might think that they could get a short-term boost like Sunderland did last year. Not that I'm suggesting they bring in Paolo Di Canio, but they might think they can get a short-term boost by sacking Meulenstein. So it could happen. Then again, there are records to be broken, and Fulham haven't won at Old Trafford for 11 years. Not in the normal set of records that Moyes likes to break. He normally likes the sort of 30-year range. Stoke hadn't beaten United since 1984, that kind of thing. So 11 years might be on the light side, but there are records to be broken. So, they might come to Old Trafford and win. You never know.
I mean, they are so unbelievably terrible that, I think we're going to win this game. Fulham are really, really bad. I tell you though, one mistake they've made is because when you're in an absolute desperate relegation scrap, what you want is your languid, completely casual, turn up when they feel like it players to all be on form. But they've got rid of all of them. They've got rid of the holy trinity of Berbatov, Taarabt and Brian Ruiz. All gone. It's the work rate levels, whoever they brought in, the average work rate at Fulham has absolutely shot up in the January transfer window.
Yes, not exactly hard-working trio there, of course. Then again, they've reduced the level of quality some bit as well, because, Taarabt, mercurial. They called himself the Moroccan Balotelli after joining Milan, which is, interesting. But I suppose so in that he doesn't deliver all the time. And some people said to have Berbatov, who's swanned his way off to Monaco. And Ruiz, well, he flattered to deceive. Very talented player, but didn't always deliver. Didn't score enough goals either. So, they're going to go for function over style for the last 15 games of the season. It's probably what they need, Millenstein's not stupid. He's a good coach. Who knows whether he's a good manager? And as I said, they're in a desperate situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And what better tonic for them than a visit to the 3-point hotspot capital of the world, Old Trafford. I think we're going to win, Ed. What's your prediction for that game?
Yes, I think we're going to win 74-0.
I'm going with 2-0.
Yeah, I think it's going to be messy. I'm going to go for 2-1.
Blimey.
That's what we beat Sunderland by, and Sunderland were the worst team in England when we played them. They're now rocketing up the table. It is actually very tight down there. Stoke on 11th have 25 points. Fulham in 20th have 19. So, 2 wins between 11th and bottom place in the Premier League. It's not an awful lot, so it's very tight, and it's very hard to predict who is going to get relegated. Spreading out a bit more at the top, 2 between the top 3 and then a gap to Liverpool, and of course that 15-point gap to United. So.
Yeah, nice to see Cardiff getting a win for Ole Solskjaer. That was good. I think they'll be fine. That's my Mark Lawrenson. Not very good. Yeah, anyway, they'll be fine, Gary.
You're normally better. That's just a little bit camp.
Yeah, well, Mark Lawrenson. So, we are going to play Fulham and we might win that one. And then we're going away to Arsenal where, I don't know, you got to be pretty optimistic to see that ending well for United right now. Yes,
I mean, Arsenal are up and down, I think, in terms of their performances. They did beat Palace, but they made heavy work of that, didn't they? Maybe with their bogey team, given that somehow we actually managed to beat them, the only team in the top half of the table we've actually managed to beat all season, or something to that effect. I can't see United going there and winning, but maybe this will play into Moyes' hands a little bit. United will have to play pretty negatively. We'll have to look to close up shop. Unfortunately, Moyes' team is not very good.
You can just stop there. Unfortunately, Moyes' team is not very good.
Unfortunately, Moyes' team is not very good on the break. We are not creating chances on the break. We have got the players to do that. Of course, it's not really about speed of player. It's about speed of movement and thought and passing, and we don't really do that. So I'm not sure we're going to set up in the way that, say, Ferguson's teams set up at the Emirates in recent years, where we mugged them quite a few times, didn't we, by taking them out on the break. So we'll see. I think we'll set up and try and be hard to beat, but that might backfire on us.
Yeah. I mean, I think about the game and I think, we're probably going to lose. And then I start thinking about, got Juan Mata, he's pretty good. Got Van Persie up front, he can score goals. Rooney's good. Probably play Januzaj in that game. That'd be exciting. I can maybe do them some serious damage. And then, it's like Statler and Waldorf in the Muppets. I go from being completely flat out convinced it was terrible to being convinced it's going to be wonderful. And I suppose the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's probably unfair to suggest we have absolutely no chance in that game. But given the performances lately, given the injuries in defence and all that kind of stuff, I just think it's I don't know, I think it's a long shot we're going to get anything out of that one.
Yeah, it does feel like it. I mean, one saving grace for United is that Arsenal do have some tough games, right? So they are going to have to rotate. They play Liverpool away in the league this Saturday, then they play us at home on the Wednesday, then they've got Liverpool again in the FA Cup, and then they've got the game against Bayern Munich. So they've got all these tough games in this period, and maybe the focus will go a little bit, maybe a little bit of complacency will creep in because they're playing a side down the league. God, this is desperate, isn't it? And maybe that gives United a chance.
I'm out. Drop the mic. We're done. How far we done fell. It's just unbelievable, isn't it, Ed?
Yeah. So, during the 1929 stock market crash in the States, thousands of men threw themselves off buildings and bridges because they saw no hope. Don't do that, guys, if you're listening. Not yet. Give it a couple more games first.
It's only football. It really is only football. That's the saving grace, as always, is the worst case scenario is that the football team you like is bad. Not the end of the world. And so, yeah, I suppose on that cheery note, we should wrap this podcast up.
Yes. Well, thanks for listening to this hour of moroseness. It's not been good, has it, the past week? There's been very little positivity. It was terrible on the pitch against Stoke, a terrible performance. The image that we all have in our mind now, not of Jack Holt's lovely mother, hi Tracy, but of Rio Ferdinand holding onto the walls while crimping one off. It's bad stuff.
This is all kind of unacceptable. If you want to get hold of Ed to discuss these unacceptable tendencies between now and next week, you can get him at United Rant and get me at UTD Rantcast. You can read my stuff on a Bleacher Report. You can read Ed's stuff on unitedrant.co.uk. You can find us both at facebook.com/UnitedRant. And if you want to help with covering the costs of bandwidth caused by this much morose moaning about Manchester United, you can go to unitedrant.co.uk/donate. And in spite of the football, I hope you all have a really, really lovely week and feel like joining us for another one of these approximately the same time next week, when we'll be celebrating, Ed, 2-1 when you said against Fulham. How much do you think we're going to beat Arsenal by?
I think it'll be 2-0, unfortunately, to the Gunners.
Curses. Oh, well, if you want to commiserate with us after the loss, I think we're going to lose 1-0 in that game. No, 2-1. We're going to score a goal. If you want to commiserate with us after that, join us next week, and we look forward to speaking at you then.
See you then.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.